All right, we're diving into the world of nurse paralegals, a career that blends healthcare and law. You sent over this really interesting article by Jervio Russell, published just today. It's called Nurse Paralegal, Where Medicine Meets the Courtroom.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How someone can effectively straddle those two worlds.
Yeah, right. What exactly does a nurse paralegal do?
Well, it's more than just, knowing a little bit about both fields. A nurse paralegal is a registered nurse. They have their RN license, but they've also gone through paralegal training.
So they're not just nurses who understand some legal stuff.
No, they're deeply immersed in both sides. They become this crucial link, between the medical and legal worlds. They can take something like a doctor's notes or a complicated medical chart and translate it for the courtroom.
The article mentions this is especially important for cases involving medical malpractice, personal injury, workers' compensation. Right.
Absolutely. These are situations where understanding the nuances of medical procedures and records is crucial. It's not just about knowing the law, it's about how the medicine informs the law.
That reminds me of the story in the article about the nurse paralegal who caught a tiny decimal point error in a medication dosage, and it completely changed the case.
It's a perfect example of how their expertise can be the difference maker. They have this unique ability to spot inconsistencies or errors that others might miss, and those can be pivotal.
So we know they have a huge impact, but what does their day-to-day actually look like? I imagine there's a lot of variety.
You're right, there is. One day they might be reviewing medical records for a wrongful death lawsuit, and the next they're advising a lawyer on a potential negligence case.
Wow. So they wear a lot of different hats. Do they typically work in law firms? Or is it broader than that?
It's actually pretty diverse. You'll find nurse paralegals in law firms, of course, but also in hospitals, insurance companies, and some even work independently as consultants.
Wow. So it's a pretty versatile career path. Let's say someone is listening to this and thinking, okay, this sounds amazing. How do I actually become a nurse paralegal? What does that journey entail?
Well, it's definitely a multi-step process, and it all starts with becoming a registered nurse.
Okay, so first things first, you need that nursing degree, either an associate's or a bachelor's, and then you have to pass the NCLEX exam.
Right. But even after becoming an RN, the article stresses that you really need significant nursing experience to excel as a nurse paralegal. Ideally, a few years in a high-pressure environment like the ER, the ICU, or even surgery.
Yeah, I can see why that's important. You need to be comfortable in those intense situations and develop that sharp eye for detail.
Exactly. It's about understanding the nuances of patient care and recognizing when something seems off. Once you have that solid nursing foundation, you move on to the paralegal side of things.
And that usually involves a paralegal training program.
Yeah.
Right? Preferably one approved by the American Bar Association.
That's the most common and respected route, yeah. These programs give you a deep dive into legal research, document writing, and all the ins and outs of court procedures.
The article also mentions internships as a valuable way to apply that knowledge and start making connections in the field.
They're highly recommended. It's a chance to get real-world experience, build your network, and maybe even land a job offer after you graduate.
And for those who are really ambitious, there's also the option of getting certified, right?
Yes, through the American Legal Nurse Consultant Certification Board, or ALNCCB. That certification demonstrates your commitment to the field and can give you a real advantage when you're job hunting.
Okay, so it's a demanding path, but it sounds incredibly rewarding for someone who is passionate about both healthcare and law. And speaking of rewards, let's talk about earning potential. What's the salary range like for nurse paralegals?
Well, the good news is they typically earn more than traditional paralegals. The article mentions salaries ranging from $50,000 to $110,000 annually, but there are a lot of factors that influence where you fall within that range.
Like years of experience, location, maybe what kind of law you specialize in.
Exactly. And the type of employer matters too. Someone working for a large hospital system in a big city with a specialized certification is likely to earn more than someone just starting out in a small town.
And what about those who decide to go the independent consultant route?
They have the potential to earn even more, with hourly rates often between $75 to $150. Of course, that comes with its own set of challenges like finding clients and managing your own business.
So it seems like a career with a lot of earning potential, but it also takes a lot of dedication and hard work to reach those higher salary levels. What I'm really curious about is why there's such a growing demand for nurse paralegals right now. What's driving that?
It really comes down to the changing landscape of healthcare. The system is becoming increasingly complex, which unfortunately leads to more lawsuits, more regulations, and a greater need for specialized legal expertise.
I've definitely seen that in the news lately. More malpractice cases, more personal injury claims, and even all those product liability cases involving medical devices.
It's a trend that's unlikely to slow down anytime soon. And because of that, lawyers are scrambling to find professionals who can bridge the gap between medicine and law. Someone who can decipher medical records, spot potential negligence, and explain all those complicated medical concepts in a way that makes sense to a legal team.
So nurse paralegals are becoming indispensable in these kinds of cases. They're the ones who can connect the dots and make sure everyone understands what's going on. Now, one thing I've always been a little fuzzy on is the difference between a nurse paralegal and a legal nurse consultant. They seem pretty similar.
They do, and the article does a good job of clarifying the distinction. While both roles involve bridging healthcare and law, a nurse paralegal has that formal paralegal training, so they're deeply involved in the actual legal processes, filing documents, drafting arguments, preparing for trial.
So they're more hands-on with the law itself.
Right. Legal nurse consultants, or LNCs, rely more heavily on their nursing experience. They're more like advisors to attorneys, providing insight on the medical aspects of a case, but they might not have that formal paralegal education.
So it really depends on whether you prefer the hands-on legal work of a nurse paralegal or the more advisory, medical-focused role of an LNC.
Exactly. Both are incredibly valuable, but it's important to understand the differences so you can choose the path that best aligns with your strengths and interests. And let's be realistic, neither path is a walk in the park. This is a challenging field, and the article doesn't shy away from that.
It sounds like you have to be comfortable juggling the fast-paced world of medicine with the very meticulous nature of law.
You do. It requires constant learning and adaptation, keeping up with new laws, medical advancements, and all the latest legal precedents. But for many people, the rewards far outweigh the challenges.
I imagine it's incredibly fulfilling to know you're making a real difference in people's lives, especially when they're going through something as difficult as a legal battle.
Absolutely. You get to be a problem solver, an advocate, and sometimes even a bit of a detective, uncovering crucial details that can change the outcome of a case. And the intellectual stimulation is definitely a draw, too. You're constantly learning and growing in this field.
It sounds like a career that would appeal to a very specific kind of person. Someone who loves detail, enjoys a fast-paced environment, and wants to use their skills to make a positive impact.
Exactly. And for those who are intrigued, there's a whole lot more to uncover about this dynamic field, especially as we look towards the future.
So we've talked about what nurse paralegals do today, but what about tomorrow? The article hints that there are some big changes on the horizon for this field.
Yeah, it's true. Healthcare is constantly evolving, and that creates all sorts of new legal challenges and new opportunities for nurse paralegals.
One area that immediately comes to mind is telemedicine. It's just exploded in recent years. But what does that mean from a legal standpoint?
Well, it's uncharted territory in a lot of ways. Suddenly, you have doctors practicing across state lines, questions about liability if something goes wrong, and a whole host of privacy concerns.
I hadn't even thought about the interstate issue. So how do nurse paralegals fit into all of this?
They're going to be essential in helping healthcare providers navigate this new world, you know? They'll need to ensure telemedicine practices comply with regulations, patient information is protected, and everyone understands the legal risks.
It sounds like a huge learning curve, not just for doctors, but for the legal professionals who support them.
Absolutely, but it's also incredibly exciting. Nurse paralegals get to be on the cutting edge of healthcare law, shaping how this technology is used, making sure it benefits both patients and providers.
Okay, so telemedicine is one big change. What else is the article highlighting?
Another major concern is data breaches. We hear about them all the time, but healthcare is particularly vulnerable.
Why is that?
Because healthcare data is so valuable. Think about it. Social security numbers, medical histories, financial information, it's a goldmine for hackers.
And when those breaches happen, the consequences can be disastrous.
Exactly. Not just for the individuals whose data is compromised, but for the healthcare institutions themselves. They face massive fines, lawsuits, damage to their reputation.
So where do nurse paralegals come in?
Well, they're the ones who can help mitigate the fallout from these breaches. They can assist with investigations, assess the potential legal damage, and work with attorneys to develop strategies to protect both the institution and the affected individuals.
It sounds like they need a really strong understanding of both healthcare data and the legal ramifications of a breach.
They do, and because they have that expertise, they're becoming highly sought after by healthcare providers, those who are trying to prevent these breaches from happening in the first place.
It seems like a lot of their work is focused on preventing problems before they even arise. Is that a fair assessment?
It's definitely a big part of their role, but it's not just about reacting to crises. They're also involved in shaping the future of healthcare law, especially as it relates to bioethics.
Oh, that's right. The article mentioned that too. Can you remind me what that's all about?
Well, bioethics deals with the ethical implications of advancements in medicine and biology, things like gene editing, AI in healthcare, organ transplantation. All of these raise complex ethical and legal questions.
That's right. I remember reading about a case where a patient was denied a life-saving organ transplant because of their criminal history. It sparked a huge debate about whether that was ethical.
Exactly. And those are the kinds of questions that nurse paralegals will be grappling with more and more. They'll need to understand the science, but also consider the potential legal and ethical ramifications.
It seems like they need to be comfortable with ambiguity because a lot of these situations don't have easy answers.
That's a great point. They need strong critical thinking skills, the ability to weigh different perspectives, and a deep understanding of the ethical principles that guide healthcare.
So it's not just about knowing the law, it's about being able to apply it in these really nuanced and complex situations.
Right, and that's what makes this field so fascinating. It's constantly evolving, and nurse paralegals are right at the forefront, helping to shape the future of healthcare law, as it adapts to these groundbreaking changes.
Now, before we move on, I want to touch on something we mentioned earlier. The distinction between nurse paralegals and legal nurse consultants. The article uses this interesting analogy to explain the difference.
Yes, I like that part. It says that nurse paralegals are in the room when the case gets built, whereas legal nurse consultants might just tell us what to look for.
That's a helpful way to think about it. So the nurse paralegal is more hands-on, working directly with attorneys on the legal strategy and execution.
Exactly. While the LNC might be more focused on analyzing medical records, identifying potential issues, and providing expert testimony.
And that goes back to what we were saying about choosing the path that best aligns with your interests and skills.
Absolutely. Some people thrive on that hands-on legal work, while others prefer to focus on the medical aspects and provide guidance from a more analytical perspective.
So we've talked about what they do, why it's important, and the different career paths available. But I'm also curious about the personal qualities that make someone successful as a nurse paralegal.
That's a great question. It's not just about having the right credentials, it's also about having a certain mindset.
What kind of mindset are we talking about?
Well, first and foremost, you need to be incredibly detail-oriented. We've already talked about how crucial it is to catch those tiny errors in medical records or procedures, and that requires a meticulous eye for detail.
It also sounds like you need to be a good problem solver, especially when you're dealing with all these complex ethical and legal dilemmas.
Absolutely. You need to be able to think critically, analyze information from different angles, and come up with creative solutions to challenging problems.
And I imagine you need to be a really good communicator, too. You're constantly explaining complex medical concepts to people who might not have a medical background.
Communication is key. You need to be able to explain things clearly and concisely, both verbally and in writing. And you need to be able to adapt your communication style depending on who you're talking to, whether it's a lawyer, a judge, a doctor, or a patient.
So strong analytical skills, attention to detail, and excellent communication. Those seem like the core qualities.
Yes, and I would add one more, a commitment to lifelong learning. Healthcare and law are constantly changing, so you need to be willing to constantly update your knowledge and skills.
So attending conferences, reading industry journals, maybe even taking additional courses.
Exactly. You have to be a lifelong learner to thrive in this field.
This has been incredibly insightful. We've covered so much ground already, but there's still one piece of the puzzle missing.
Yeah.
The nuts and bolts of actually becoming a nurse paralegal. Okay, so let's say someone is listening and they're like, all right, I'm in. This is it. Where do I even begin?
Well, as we've talked about, it all starts with that solid foundation in nursing. So, if you're not an RN already, that's priority number one. Get that nursing degree, whether it's an associate's or a bachelor's, and pass that NCLEX exam.
And I guess it's not just about passing the exam. Like, the real learning happens out in the field, right?
Oh, absolutely. The article really emphasizes getting experience in those high-pressure clinical settings, like the ER, the ICU, maybe even surgery.
Yeah.
That's where you'll develop those critical thinking skills, that laser focus that nurse paralegals need.
So once you've got a few years of nursing experience, what's next?
Then it's time to dive into the legal side of things. And, as we mentioned before, the most recognized path is to enroll in a paralegal training program, preferably one that's approved by the American Bar Association.
And those programs cover like everything from legal research and writing to ethics and court procedures, right?
They do, yeah. It's a pretty intensive dive into the legal world, but you'll come out of it with the knowledge and skills you need to be a nurse paralegal.
The article also mentioned internships. Are those valuable in this field?
Oh, incredibly valuable. It's a chance to actually apply what you've learned in a real legal setting, Get some hands-on experience and start building your network.
Because, as in any field, connections matter.
Oh, they really do. Internships give you the chance to connect with attorneys, legal nurse consultants, other professionals, people who can offer guidance and potentially open doors to job opportunities later on.
And for those who want to really show their expertise, there's also the option of getting certified through the AL and CCB, right?
That's right. Certification shows potential employers you've gone the extra mile, to develop your skills and knowledge. And that can give you a real edge, especially in a field this specialized.
It's a lot to take in, but it really paints a clear picture of the path. It's demanding, but the potential rewards are significant.
Oh, absolutely. You're not just building a career, you're building a bridge between these two crucial fields. And you're using your skills to make a real difference in people's lives.
And as we've discussed, this field is only going to become more important as the healthcare landscape keeps changing.
Exactly. With telemedicine growing, data breaches, all the bioethical questions popping up, the need for skilled nurse paralegals is only going to increase.
This deep dive has been eye-opening. It's really incredible to see how these professionals are shaping the future of healthcare law. For anyone who's drawn to this unique blend of medicine and law and who wants to use their skills to advocate, this could be the perfect career path.
I couldn't agree more. It's a challenging but ultimately rewarding field with so many opportunities to grow and learn.
And if you're looking for more insight into the world of paralegals, I highly recommend checking out Jervio.com. They've got tons of resources on paralegal studies, career development, all that good stuff.
It's a great resource.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive. And I have to say, I'm feeling pretty inspired.
Me too. It's amazing to see how these dedicated professionals are working at the intersection of healthcare and law, making a real difference.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into something you're passionate about.